Unlike Estonia and Latvia, there never existed a Lithuanian Waffen-SS Legion. Why was this? Because Lithuania suffered a similar ordeal, ending up in the Soviet sphere of influence after the Hitler-Stalin Pact was concluded. The country was prone to Soviet interference and eventual annexation. On Stalin's orders, countless of Lithuanians were executed or deported. And then, on the 22nd of June 1941, Hitler broke the non-aggression pact with the USSR and unleashed Operation Barbarossa. Lithuanians were willing to join the Germans. In this video, we're going to talk about the Lithuanian collaboration with Nazi Germany in World War II. Welcome back on the channel. If you're new, I'm Stefan. I'm a Dutch history teacher. I like to cover history for you. If you find it interesting, consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. Do notice that Baltic collaboration with Nazi Germany in World War II is a tricky subject. And the reason for this is that unlike Western countries, there was no other enemy. For the Baltic nations, there was another enemy, and I'm talking about the Soviet Union. To explain this, we need to go back to before the First World War. Lithuania was part of the Russian Empire. At the end of the 18th century, it had become part of it. Lithuania consisted of Vilnius, Kaunas and the Suwalki provinces, as well as the city of Grodno Gardinas, which is now located in Belarus. The area belonged to the Pale of Settlement, an area where Jews were allowed to live. Therefore, Lithuania had a large number of Jews living in the country. When World War I broke out, Russia fought against the Central Powers, and Germany occupied Lithuania. After the Russian Revolution and the ensuing turmoil between 1918 and 1920, people speak about the Lithuanian Wars of Independence, where the Lithuanians fought against the Bolsheviks, the White Russian forces of the West Russian Volunteer Army that were led by Pavel Bermont-Avalov, which were also known as the Bermontians, and Poland. Interesting enough is that when the Lithuanian Wars of Independence were concluded, Vilnius, back then known as Wilno, ended up under Polish control as it has a large Polish-speaking community there. In the interwar years, Lithuania started as a Western-style democracy, but it did not last long. In 1926, Antanas Smetona established a military dictatorship. Not only anti-Russian or anti-Soviet sentiments were rife in Lithuania, also anti-German sentiments, and that had to do with the port city of Klaipėda, in German known as Memel, which was largely inhabited by ethnic Germans, but had a large Lithuanian-speaking community living outside the city. Back in 1923, the Lithuanians had occupied the disputed city. Because of this, Lithuanians were left out of a joint defensive alliance formed by Estonia and Latvia in the same year. In 1934, Lithuania was admitted, on the condition that both Klaipėda and Vilnius were non-issues. Now, despite having a so-called Balkan Entente, no military preparations had been made. In 1938, the Lithuanian army counted for 30,000 men. Relying on the League of Nations and the Western powers for their freedom, preserving an independent status became very tricky when Nazi Germany and the USSR signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, also known as the Hitler-Stalin Pact, in August 1939. The Lithuanians could now only speculate on what was to come, but what was to come had already been decided in a secret protocol, where Hitler and Stalin had divided the area in between their nations into spheres of influence, and Lithuania was to become under the Soviet sphere of influence. Hitler had already seized Klaipėda, Memeland, in March 1939. World War II started in September when Germany invaded Poland. After 3 weeks, the Soviets marched in from the east and the country was carved up. On the 10th of October, Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs Vyacheslav Molotov made Lithuanians sign a treaty with the USSR to allow Soviet troops on their soil. In return, they got Vilnius. Despite having a majority of Poles and Jews living in it, Lithuanian nationalists cherished it as essential to their country. This sweetened the deal, but full Soviet occupation occurred in June 1940, under the pretext of Lithuanians kidnapping 2 Red Army soldiers. The Lithuanian army was disbanded and many of the senior officers were either executed or imprisoned. A People's Army was created, which was later absorbed into the Soviet 29th Rifle Corps. Many Lithuanians fled abroad to Germany, where they founded the Lithuanian Activist Front, or the LAF, led by Colonel Kazys Škirpa. Others went into hiding, waiting to strike. But it were the Soviets who struck first, which happened on the night, the 13th to the 14th of June 1941, where 17,000 Lithuanians were deported. Many of them would not return. And then, on 22nd of June 1941, Nazi Germany started Operation Barbarossa. Army Group North aimed its assault through the Baltic states towards Leningrad. Among its ranks were Baltic Germans, who only recently had left their home country for Germany and now assisted the German armies, since they knew the language, the people and the terrain. As the Germans marched in, the Lithuanian June uprising occurred, where around 25,000 armed Lithuanians attacked Soviet bases. Before the Germans could do so, suffering hundreds of casualties, cities like Kaunas and Vilnius came under control of the Lithuanians, who proclaimed the Provisional Government of Lithuania. It was formed in secret before, now announced, and later disbanded on German orders. The anti-Soviet partisan units were largely disbanded and disarmed, and the LAF was banned at the end of September. The Germans had no interest in giving the Lithuanians any independence or whatsoever. Lithuania was incorporated into the Reichskommissariat Ostland as the Generalbezirk Litauen. The Lithuanians were probably the boldest in proposing collaboration. Colonel Uskaras Orbonas offered to organize an entire brigade to march in with the Wehrmacht, but the Germans wanted no such thing, preferring instead individual Lithuanians dispersed across Army Group North. The Germans did permit local police units for security tasks. These were formed out of the Lithuanians that had participated in the June uprising, armed LAF men as well as Lithuanian deserters from the Red Army. From among the 7,000 to 8,000 Lithuanian soldiers in the Red Army, some 6,500 officers and enlisted men deserted. A mere 2,000 Lithuanian soldiers, either voluntarily or under pressure, went to the Soviet Union. During the initial days, a Lithuanian army was set up under the orders of Lieutenant Colonel Antanas Špokavičius, its commander. Later this army would be prohibited. Only self-defense units were allowed, and the Germans did not recognize a Lithuanian army nor a Lithuanian government. The Nazis classified the peoples of Europe as either worthy or unworthy of performing military service. On the Eastern Front, the Nazis accepted only Italians, Finns, Romanians, Hungarians, Slovaks and Croats as allies. Persons from other Eastern European peoples, including the Lithuanians, were granted only the role of auxiliary policemen. The Lithuanian units were referred to as Lithuanian self-defense units. The names of these units changed frequently. For example, the term Lithuanian police battalions was made official only in April 1944. In Vilnius, the local German commando formed the Vilnius Reconstruction Service, the VAT, Constabulary and Labor Services. Classified as self-defense, their units became battalions. By October 1941, 5 police battalions had been established in Vilnius. These men had to perform guard duties, preparing its transfer to Lublin to guard at the Majdanek extermination camp and to secure the local railway lines. In Kaunas, police battalions were also set up. Himmler named these men the so-called Schutzmannschaften. These were collaborationist auxiliary police of native policemen serving in the areas of the Soviet Union and the Baltic states. The leadership of these lay in the hands of the SS and police leader Lucian Wysotsky. The Germans supplied the Schutzmannschaften with weapons, rations and uniforms. Often it proved that these supplies were not sufficient at all, as Germany's war was demanding more of its resources. Despite this, the number of Lithuanian Šuma battalions grew. A decision was made to form 15 battalions in September 1942, and there were nearly 16,700 Šuma men in Lithuania. And eventually 20 battalions were assembled. Šuma battalions were also deployed outside Lithuania. I already mentioned some of these men had to guard the Majdanek extermination camp. They also had to secure POWs and important sites. They were also used for murdering Jews and communists on the spot and helped to fight partisans in the region. In the summer of 1941, 3 Lithuanian Šuma battalions were sent to Belarus. These units had to purge the area of the remains of the Bolshevist army and Bolshevist partisans. Battalion members often went on so-called official trips Where this came down to were punitive actions, which included the murder of civilians, mostly Jews and Soviet POWs. In the autumn of 1941 alone, Schumann and Gestapo men shot around 46,000 persons, including some 9,000 Soviet POWs. From 1942 till 1944, the Lithuanian collaborators did not participate in murders against the local population. They mostly fought partisans. In December of 1944, one battalion was disbanded. Other units were sent again to Belarus, but also to northern Russia, Ukraine and Poland. Anti-partisan warfare in Belarus claimed many lives under the Lithuanian battalions. Also in Ukraine, they had to guard railway tracks and were often attacked by partisans. In 1942, they constructed defensive fortifications in the Voronezh district. With heavy losses, they withdrew to Kharkiv. They also served for Army Group North in the Leningrad-Pskov-Novgorod district to guard the rear areas. In January 1942, one company of a Shuma battalion was encircled near Demyansk, where the Germans succeeded in breaking out of the encirclement. Another company fought in a calm region in the winter of 1941-42. During the war, there existed an Estonian Waffen-SS Legion and also a Latvian Waffen-SS Legion. But why was there never a Lithuanian Waffen-SS Legion? Well, actually, did you know that there were plans to establish such a legion? And these plans were made by the Germans in early 1943. A deadline was set for March, although this turned out to be too tight for mustering propaganda material. At the same time, the local Lithuanian resistance launched a massive propaganda campaign of its own against such a legion. One leaflet read, "No occupation administration has the right to mobilize the citizens of the occupied areas. Only stupid people and Lithuania's traitors could go and spill their blood for the occupation at such a time." The recruitment for a Lithuanian Waffen-SS Legion ended in a complete failure. Only 5 to 10% of the Lithuanians summoned actually showed up. Himmler halted the activities and it was announced that the plan for a legion was abandoned. As a punitive measure, the universities of Kaunas and Vilnius were closed, and 46 intellectuals were deported to Stutthof concentration camp. A German report also mentioned racist reasons, and the Lithuanians were seen as the most racially mixed, which in the eyes of the Germans made them culturally backward and unsuitable for combat operations. The Germans considered that only 15% of the Lithuanian population could be Germanized, and instead they now focused their attention on recruiting Lithuanian workers to work in the factories of the Reich. The mood began to shift at the end of 1943, fearing a renewed Soviet occupation. At the same time, Polish and Soviet partisan activities were widespread in the country. Late November 1943, there were discussions between the Germans and Lithuanian representatives about the re-establishment of a Lithuanian army. And Germans, they allowed the Lithuanians to recruit 5 to 10,000 men. This recruitment would be on a voluntary basis though. 10 special units were set up under the leadership of Lieutenant General of the former Lithuanian army, Povilas Plechavičius. These units were used to fight against local partisans. In early 1944, 20,000 volunteers had come forward. The Germans made one condition, as they called for sending Lithuanian men to provide service for the German Luftwaffe. For every 2,000 Luftwaffe volunteers, the Lithuanians were allowed to mobilize 1,000 men for their national unit. SS Commander Friedrich Jaklin threatened severe reprisals against the Lithuanian population. Clearly dissatisfied, the Germans arrested General Plechavičius, who they saw as a Lithuanian nationalist instead of an ally, and disbanded the units. Around 80 Lithuanians were shot as mutineers, and a number of 3,500 were deported to Germany. Others fled. There were still some 37,000 Lithuanians serving in other German military units until the very end of the war. According to a report by the Ostministerium in January 1945, 5,400 Lithuanians were serving in the Wehrmacht, 12,000 in the Luftwaffe, 3,000 in the police, 400 in the Reichsarbeitsdienst, the RAD, Reich Labor Service, 15,000 in the Todt organization, and 1,000 in the Speer organization. One sensitive topic is the Lithuanian participation in the killing of Lithuanian Jews. That already started once the Germans invaded Lithuania. In the city of Kaunas, Jews were publicly murdered by Lithuanian nationalists known as the Lietuvių Garage Massacre. One German witnessed it and wrote the following about it. There was a large number of women in the crowd, and they had lifted up their children or stood them on chairs or boxes so they could see better. At first I thought this must be a victory celebration or some type of sporting event, because of the cheering, clapping and laughter that kept breaking out. However, when I inquired what was happening, I was told that the death dealer of Kovno was at work, and that this was where collaborators and traitors were finally meted out their rightful punishment. During the war, Lithuanian Šuma men guarded the Vilnius ghetto and on 2 occasions provided support for the transport of Jews to the murder sites Panaria. Other men participated in the killing of Jews in the Vinnytsia district in Ukraine. Although facts are contested, it appears that together with German soldiers and Ukrainian policemen, Lithuanian Šuma men shot 300 Jewish men, women and children. 2 Lithuanian Šuma battalions guarded the Majdanek concentration and extermination camp in occupied Poland. They had to patrol the perimeter. Inside the camp, however, the inmates were guarded by the special SS unit, the SS Totenkopf Sturmbahn. Of the 220,000 Lithuanian Jews, 195,000 would not survive the Second World War. However, it's crucial to emphasize that not all Lithuanians were collaborators, and there were individuals and groups who resisted the Nazi occupation and attempted to save Jewish lives. Some Lithuanians risked their lives to hide Jews and provide them with support, contributing to the rescue of Jewish individuals during the war. Looking at the uniforms of the Lithuanian collaborators, the initial self-defense units wore at first uniforms of the previous disbanded Lithuanian army. Sometimes they wore civilian clothing, which was later all replaced by German army or police field grey. A shield in Lithuania's colors and a cap cockade with similar colors was authorized. Another arm shield with the letters Lietuva, the Lithuanian spelling of Lithuania, also existed and can be seen on this photograph. When the Germans were driven back in the summer of 1944 during Operation Barbarossa, most Šuma battalions withdrew with the Germans as the Soviets retook Lithuania. While some units were trapped at the Courland pocket, others tried to make it for Germany. As Germany eventually surrendered, most of the Lithuanian Šuma men surrendered to the Soviets. During the war, a total of 28 Lithuanian Šuma battalions was set up, in which between 13,000 and 15,000 men served. At least 500 men from the battalions were killed in combat against the partisans and the Red Army. The number of injured and POWs is unknown. Lithuania would come under Soviet rule again. Resistance fighters known as the Forest Brothers would resist Soviet rule for years after the war. In March 1919, Lithuania was the first of the 15 Soviet republics to declare its independence. If you want to learn about the Estonian collaboration during World War II, click here and click here for Latvian collaboration during the Second World War. Thanks for watching. See you later.